Good.
My name is Mike McGowan. I've actually been skydiving since 1964, and through the years I've seen so many changes, not just in the equipment, and although the equipment has changed dramatically from round canopies that we used to cut holes in so we could get some drive out of them to square canopies. It used to be that what killed us skydivers was that the equipment would malfunction, you know. And now the equipment is working good, so we're killing ourselves with crazy landings and that. I think it's our nature to push things to the limit. And one of the reasons we jumped back in the early days was because there was that chance that all of our equipment would fail and we would die. And not that we're have a death wish, but I do think we like to take things to the edge. And there's nothing greater to gamble than your own life. There isn't, you know. So I've seen the equipment change, but I've also seen the people change. Back when I first started, when you seen a girl in the sport, you wouldn't want to arm wrestle because you might get beat. I mean, you had to be pretty tough to jump all that heavy equipment, and every landing was a controlled crash. There's no question about that. And now the equipment, if you take advantage of the things that it has to offer, almost every landing can be soft. People go thousands of jumps without having a malfunction. And I just saw Dave DeWolf's video, and he had mentioned that we used to have malfunctions quite often. And he's absolutely right. What even worse was we didn't have the advantage of things like the three-ring release. We had cape wells that would work sometimes and wouldn't work sometimes. And there's times when you would cut away, and they both didn't cut away at the same time, the one would lodge and you wouldn't cut it away. So you were left with the option of dumping your reserve into the main, So not only did we have malfunctions more often, but more often the malfunctions harmed or killed us. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to tell you, we all know that the sport has its obvious dangers, but it also has an obvious attraction other than the fact that we're taking things to the edge. When we jump, when we leave that aircraft, God, that sounds corny, but I gotta say it, we're free. I mean, I'm not thinking about my electric bill. I'm not wondering if I'm gonna have enough customers this week or things like that. I'm right there in the present moment. It's high-speed meditation is what it is, really, What really draws me to the sport and keeps me in the sport now is my love for photography. I can't remember not wanting to be a photographer, and I can't remember not wanting to jump out of an airplane. I jumped out of airplanes for a long time before I finally got a camera on my helmet. In fact, my first camera jumps where I just took it out and was holding the camera with my hand, and I would take a picture, cock the camera, fly to where I needed to be, take a picture, cock the camera, and fly to where I needed to be. I just wanted to take freefall photographs that bad. I mean, I like photography, period, but then you add skydiving to it, well, you've got it all done. Memorable experiences, as I mentioned earlier, things were different back in the old days. We had a different mentality. We liked the idea that we cheated death, and when we had skydiving patches, which we used to wear all over our clothes, so the civilians, the normies out there would know that we were skydivers and that we cheated death and we did these crazy things. But we had a different mentality. We didn't have the skill levels that we have now. As a matter of fact, we'd make a formation and it never occurred to us to break that formation and go to another one. Hence relative work. Usually it took us so long to get, if there was 5 of us in an aircraft, it took so long for us to get 5 people together that we were lucky to be done with it by 2,000 feet. So 2,000 feet wasn't an unheard of break-off altitude. And I know that sounds crazy now. It was crazy then too, but like I said, we were different back then. We didn't have to track because round canopies didn't surge, so we could just turn away from each other and open. But one of the things that we used to love to do was a low pull contest. That was where you were revered. The guy who had the nerve to open the lowest. And the person that was the craziest. I mean, now we think the person that's the craziest go away, who goes to some other drop zone and jump. But back then, you were recruited. I remember I was living in Southern California, and I flew up to Northern California to jump with some friends of mine, Dave Jeter and Don Claypool, and nobody knew me up there. And we went to a drop zone called Calistoga. Calistoga was famous at that point. For one, it was pretty good at relative work. Another is that a guy went up with his girlfriend and she had trouble, and he stayed with her and fought with her to help her get pulled, and got her pulled, and he went in. And then, I mean, they had it marked there, almost like a memorial site for this guy. But Don and John and Dave told the drop zone operator, hey, we got this new idea. Now, this is long before AFF, long before AFF. He says, we got this guy here, and he's really heads up, and we're going to take him up and do a four-way with him. And we've taught him how to land, and we taught him canopy control, and we're even going to put him on a para commander, which was unheard of back then for a new jumper. You used to have 200 jumps minimum. And the owner-operator, instead of saying, you need to go someplace else to jump, says, cool, let's see how that works. Well, I had a 400 or 500 jumps at the time, so we went up and we did our four-way, and came down, and boy, we were the heroes for the day, you know. And memory plays tricks on us, but I'd like to think my memory's right there. To cap it all off, I pulled real low, right around 1,000 feet, which made me the real hero of the day. I didn't buy any drinks that night. You know, I didn't buy any drinks that night. I didn't always just do crazy things. About the time skydiving and photography and I met, was early pioneer days. We were jumping video cameras with tubes in them, so if you looked at the sun too long, you would run the tube out, with chest recorders, and there was very few of us. And film, I don't know if any of you remember that, but we used to actually have the exposure and the settings and the focus and everything set right. The camera wouldn't do it for us. But everything was brand new, and there was nobody to teach us how to do it. Just nobody. And so we kind of made it up as we went along, and we learned as we went along. One of the first uses they used for video was for four-way people to train. Tommy Pyrus and a few people like that, who are probably a lot of you have never heard of, but he was one of the pioneers in four-way. He came up with the idea, we're going to have a video guy come up and jump with us and film our jump, and then we can evaluate our dive, and it'll help us learn better, you know. So at this time, that's about as far as video was used, except to document people's fun jumps, and then everybody could look at each other and laugh and hoot and holler. I was out at Zephyr Hills, and they had the Halloween boogie, was it? Maybe it would have been the Halloween boogie, and they had a big competition. One of them was 10-way speed, the other was 16-way, and I don't know if you all know much about Florida, but you can get cloudy there. And I don't know if any of you remember George Cabela, the owner of Z Hills, but he was a businessman. He saw skydivers as being in the airplane, buying jump tickets to make a living. And the meet was on hold because it was too cloudy, and back then we were judging with ground-to-air telemeters, you know. And if you couldn't see the skydivers, you couldn't judge them. So Sandy Williams was the chief judge, who was a very good friend of mine. She's an awesome lady. And her and I and George and Dave Floyd were sitting in the room trying to figure out what to do, because George didn't want the meet to go south. He wanted to put people in the air. And Sandy says, I just can't judge it that way. I've got to see the whole dive. And then she looks at me and Sandy's like a sister to me. She says, Michael, you go up and film them, and I'll judge from your film. And nobody had ever even thought about that, you know. And Cabela loved the idea. Oh my God, we'll get people in the air regardless of the clouds and that sort of thing. So I thought, sure, it's another reason to jump, it's another reason to film and stuff like that. And back then, the meets at Zephyr Hills were world class. People from around the world were there. It was a national sort of an event. And me and Dave Floyd and a few other people went up and we jumped with them. We developed the rear float then, because usually they have the camera guy go out last. Don't ask me the logic in that. And so we did the rear float so we'd get the exit, especially for the 10-way Speed Star. And we filmed them, and there was a lot of people against it. Jerry Bird was one of them. They had figured out how to trick the ground to air. And they hadn't figured out how to trick the air to air. And so Bird was definitely against it, you know. And but we did it, we pulled it off, and voila, there was a birth, who knew it at the time, of air-to-air judging. The next year, they took and judged U.S. Nationals that way. And the funny part was, that particular year, they had protested that the four-way had to be out of a Cessna because it was unfair, because the smaller drop zones had nothing but Cessnas back then. And so they would put the four-way teams in the Cessnas, and then they would have another airplane with 4 photographers, and we would fly in formation, and we one at a time. Each time we'd get information with the next four-way team, and we'd film. Each time we'd get the four. And this is back with chest recorders, and like I said, the old video tube cameras and stuff like that. So we've seen a lot of changes, not just in parachute equipment, but in camera equipment. My typical helmet back then was a modified motorcycle helmet, no quick release. I jumped a Hasselblad, which probably weighed 6 or 7 pounds, a Leica, which weighed another 3 or 4 pounds, video camera, which weighed another 3 or 4 pounds. The helmet itself weighed 3 or 4 pounds. I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I told you that all put together with the lenses and everything, my helmet weighed as much or more than my rig did. You know, and that was back when squares, you just didn't have the easy opening squares. They opened pretty hard. If I had it to do over again, would I do it? In a heartbeat, you know. We knew, us videographers and photographers, we knew that we were in groundbreaking era, a new era. Before, there was incredible people like Louis Melendez and Carl Banish and Chip Maury and stuff like that, but they either shot film for documentaries or they shot just stills. And we knew that we were in a real turning edge to find that video would start being used for not only competition but for evaluation of equipment and such things as that. So that was a wonderful time of my life, and as far as accomplishments, I've never been much of a competitor, but Patrick Desgaron, the Sky Surfer, I don't know if many of you remember him, but he was a legend in his time, and he was a phenomenal talent. We were having a world meet here at Skydive, Arizona, and one of the events was sky surfing. And I filmed a little bit, but not a lot, you know, because it was very interesting to me. It was something new to film. And he came to me and in his French accents asked me if I would be his videographer. And extremely honored, but I said, Patrick, I'm not sure how to do it. He said, just do it like you did when you were out filming me for stills. And so I did, and we won first place. So I even though I'm not a competitor, I got a gold medal there, and I'm very proud of the fact that I have a gold medal, especially for somebody who doesn't compete. This is a great sport. It's not just something to do on the weekends, for me anyhow. The sport, if you were to look around my studio, you'd see that my whole life revolves around the sport, around the people, around the events, around the new things that are happening. The skydivers today are nothing short of phenomenal. They fly on every axis there is possible, from their heads to their feet, to their sides, to everything. You know, again, DeWolf, I read his thing, and one of the things that hit home is, I'm not the skydiver I used to be. You know, and I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. I'm a better photographer than I used to be, so I kind of make up for it a little bit that way. But I can't keep up with these kids. They have set new stages, and now they are in the middle of a groundbreaking era. If somebody would have told me 10 years ago that we would be flying head down and be turning points and stuff like that, I would have got a wonderful laugh from that, you know. I thought when you were head down, that was because you were headed towards a formation. You were last out of a DC-3 and you were headed towards a formation. We all have our first jump story, and mine was, I joined the Navy, and when I took my aptitude test, they gave me a list of things that I could go to school for. And it was pretty long, so I do have that ounce of sense, barely. But one of them was parachute rigger school, which didn't particularly appeal to me until I saw that one of the prerequisites to graduate was to jump with a parachute that you packed. I quit going down the list, did the big check mark, and went into parachute rigger school. And my first jump, and that was in '64, was out of a DC-3 C-47. I don't know if any of you know what that is, but it's a big twin reciprocal engine airplane used in World War II. Actually, the airplane I jumped out of was probably built about the same time I was born, and it was with a non-modified canopy, no sleeve, nothing to retard the deployment, nothing to give you any forward speed, a chest mounted reserve, and it wasn't static line. They had us go out free fall, and it worked. We went out in the airborne position, counted 3, pulled the ripcord, and put our hand back in there so there was nothing for anything to catch because we were certainly tumbling, and rode with the wind, and the best we could do was try to stop the oscillations of the canopy because there was no modifications in it. And again, I mean, what a wonderful way to start in the sport, because that was the bottom. It could only get better from there, and it did. So that's my first jump story, and it was a great one, and if I could write the script, I wouldn't change it any different. Probably, if I was going to summarize, it wouldn't be to the people who are presently jumping out of airplanes. You don't need me to tell you what you already know. That this is one of the most fascinating sports that a guy could do. And now the neat part is, because the equipment has gotten so good and reliable, it's adventurous and scary as hell when you make your first jump. I'd be a liar if I didn't tell you, if I told you different. But truth be told, if you follow the guidelines by USPA and have only just about an ounce of common sense, which is just about what I almost make, it's a pretty safe sport. Especially when you're making your first jumps, your cannon jumps and your AFF jumps, because you're not allowed to use your own discretion on safety and stuff like that. That's really where people get hurt today. It's not the people who are making their first jumps. It's the people who have that, they've reached that spot where they think they're bulletproof, and that the rules really don't make no sense to them, just to only other people. But of course that isn't where you would be when you would make your first jump. And nobody knows what it's like, nor have I run into anybody who can adequately explain to a person who hasn't jumped what it's like to jump. And what this does is create a camaraderie between us folks who have jumped, because we know, and we know you know, and we can share that common bond. I mean, when we're not jumping, we're talking about jumping. And when we're not talking about jumping, we're doing something to fix our equipment or work on something related to jumping, or we're out working to make a dollar so we can buy another jump ticket, you know. It's, as I said in the beginning, it's not just a sport. Make no mistake, it is a sport. And our competitors are athletes. But it's a way of life. And because it's as it is, it's not like hockey or basketball or something that is really physically demanding that you kind of have to let go of when you reach your 50s. I'm 67 and I'm still jumping. You know, I don't jump as often as I used to, but it's mostly because I have other things to do with my photography and stuff like that. It's not a physical limitation. So if you haven't jumped, come on out and make a jump with us. And then all the things that I said, you'll say, aha. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Awesome.